Hello everyone, it's Deborah from Attic Lane here with another video. This time I'm showing you how I made 10 cards using the latest Julie Loves kit, and this kit is called Julie Loves Mandalas, so let's see what we have inside. Oh, nice. So we have some very colourful candies. These have got gold on them. I am assuming they're going to match the colours in this pad. So this is 6x6 paper pad, 5 sheets of 8 designs. Let's see what we have. Oh, some beautiful backgrounds there. That blue's gorgeous. Really, really pretty. That's going to be great for backgrounds and for matting and layering. That's really, really cool. Okay, so these match these paper sheets. That's great. Okay, so now we have scalloped edge frames. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of each. So these have, I don't know if you can see these have flowers on the edges, embossed flowers. This has diamonds around the frame. That one's easier to see. This one has more flowers. These are larger design flowers. And again, there's 5 of those. I think I'm telling you the truth there. And then these ones have, that matches the stamp by the looks of it, or very similar to the stamp. So it has mandalas on both corners. So that would be really good for inking over and then maybe rubbing the ink off or distressing those edges. That would be lovely. So there's 4 different designs. That's absolutely loads of those. Look how thick that is. Loads. This is the stamp set. You order this in addition to the kit, and then they just add it in with your kit. That's great. And there's a little subscription stamp there, and you put that onto your little loyalty card, and then when you have 6, I think you get a free stamp set. I don't know if that's a fixed stamp set or a random one, but this stamp set is beautiful. So you've got a central mandala there, you've got loads of different sentiments around it. Best wishes, with love, birthday surprise, thank you, special friend, lots of options. And then smaller circles. They're going to be fun. They look great. This is information about the extras that you can buy to go with your kit if you want. This is your inspiration sheet. Some really colourful ideas in here. Gorgeous. That's the secret thing. I'm not going to show you the secret thing. That's a little treat that you get in your box. And then there are lots and lots of these. Look how many sheets of these we're getting. So these are all mandalas. I never know if you say it mandala or mandala or whatever. I'll probably say it various different ways. So there's 3 sheets of these, and these are gold embossed. They're beautiful. They'll be really fun to play with. 4 large ones, 1 little one. And then there are a whole load of sentiments, and these match what there is on the stamp set. So there we go, best wishes in a circle, but these are gold embossed. You can see the shine on the gold. And then we have some flowers as well. They'll be really useful. Beautiful. And again, gold embossed. And we have 3 sheets of each of those. So that's lots and lots and lots to play with in this kit. So let's crack on with card 1. I'm starting with one of the large mandalas, and as you can see I've cut it out, and I'm going to cut out the inside wheel of this. So I'm just going around the petal shapes. It's important not to cut too far down into the middle, because otherwise all you'll do is cut out the whole of the inside. You don't want to do that. You want to just cut it out so you can pop up the petal like I'm showing you now. It's a leaf, not a petal, but you know what I mean. So do that all the way around. And then I've got a piece of gold mirror card, and I'm going to glue the mandala onto the mirror card. So now when you pull up the leaf, you'll have a nice gold glimmer underneath. I'm now going to cut out around the edge again so that the gold mirror card will create a border. Now, although I've taken one of these frames, I'm not going to use this as a frame. I'm going to glue my mandala onto the frame, and then I'm going to use the frame as a border, and I'm going to cut around that again. This means that my white border will have a little bit more interest because it will have that texture of the frame as well. I'm going to use a piece of the paper from the pad to back my card. So I'm using a white card base. I've cut my piece of paper to fit and leave a little white border around the outside, and I've glued that into position on my base card. I'm going to use one of the round sentiments, and I've actually coloured this with just some colouring pens, and I've put some blue and green on this to match my paper. I've backed it with some foam tape, and I'm going to adhere this into the very centre of the mandala. And then when I stick the mandala in place, my card will be complete. And that's a nice, simple, elegant card, but it's got lots and lots of glimmer and shimmer to it, and when you see it in the light, it really does come to life. For card 2, I'm using Craft Card, and I've got 3 archival ink colours, and the 3 colours are Fern Green, Red Geranium and Cornflower Blue. And I'm going to stamp onto 3 pieces of craft card which I've already cut out, and it doesn't matter that the mandala goes outside of the base, I don't mind that. I've got some of the candies. This is the one that has the gold foiling on top, and I'm just sticking those right into the centre of each of my stamped images. I have a piece of white card, and I'm going to stick my craft panels onto the white craft card. Before I stamped the craft panels, I had measured them to make sure that they would fit nicely onto a piece of white card this size and would leave me a white border around each of the panels. And next up, I'm going to use a piece of craft as my card base, so I'm going to glue the whole of the design onto the card base. I'm using a wet glue because that gives you some wiggle room if you need to move things around just before it fixes. If you don't want to see stamps being cut, you may want to look away now, because I'm looking for 2 stamps that I can split in half. I want to add a long sentiment to my card, but these sentiments are all designed to fit within circles. So I'm looking for 2 that I can split apart without destroying the stamp if I want to put it back together and use it in a circle. So that's great. So I can use just to say, and then I've got a second stamp that says enjoy today, and as you can see, I'm cutting them down the middle, and the best way I've found to do that is to fold the stamp in half before you go into it with your scissors, because then it's exposing its narrowest point. So I had a little bit of practice to make sure that I could get my words in a straight line, and I've stamped them out a few times because I think they're going to be useful for further cards as well, and I'm just cutting them out into strips. For my craft panel card, I want to use this sentiment right across the top, and to give it a little bit more interest, I'm going to cut a fishtail at each end. And I hope the end justifies my cutting up of 2 of my word stamps. I think this is just the way I needed the words to be laid out to complete this card. And once that's secure, my card is complete. For card 3, I'm using another of the pages from the paper pads. I'm using the blue and grey one, and you can see I'm seeing how matting and layering would look with a white base onto a grey card, although I do change that later on. I'm inking up the round mandala stamp with Versamark ink, and I'm going to ink all over this piece of paper, and then I'm going to use a white embossing powder, I've put the white embossing powder on so I can see where else I want to stamp images on that, and I've switched to my board so that I can heat set this and not damage my mat underneath. There are lots of sentiments that you can choose from, and I wanted to use quite a few, so I've stuck them into the centre of the white embossed mandalas, and you can see what I meant about the change I made to the base card. I've gone with a craft base. For card 4, I've again used one of the gold mandalas and I'm cutting it in half. I've got a white card base and I'm cutting the bottom off of that card base. I'm using some of the pink paper from the pad and I'm cutting it so that it will fit the top of my card, and I've also cut a little strip of paper and I'm going to join both of these up with a piece of clear acetate. I'm going to cut the acetate so that it fits the card size. When the acetate is fixed in place, I can glue my pink strip of paper onto the bottom of the card, onto the acetate. I'm going to use the top from the cut mandala. I think I've explained that properly. You can see I'm using one of the halves to go onto the top of the card. And then I'm using another of the full mandalas, which I've also cut around the outside of, on the inside of the card. I'm gluing that in place by eye. I know that it matches with the top piece. And I'm going to use one of the round sentiments to glue onto the top piece. So you can see the sentiment is just on the top, not glued to the acetate as well. I've chosen some of the flowers and I'm going to just bend them around my fingers to give them a little bit of dimension. I'm going to glue 3 of the large ones on the base of the card onto the acetate, and I've taken 3 of the candies and I'm actually turning them inside out before I stick them down into the centre of those flowers, because I want to complete the look of the flowers with some imagination crafts, just pearls, and this one is called Pure Gold. And with that, my card is finished. For card 5, I'm using a piece of paper from the pad, and I'm going to go around the border of this with a nice wax, gilding wax. This is Pebbio, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, and this colour is Empire Gold. You can see it gives a lovely shimmer when you go all around the outside edge of the card. This card is going to be a little bit simpler because of the complexity of the previous one. When I glue that into position on my white base card, you can see how shimmery that edge is. It gives a lovely border without too much effort. I'm going to use quite a large hole punch. This is 1 by 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to punch a hole in the top of my card. Now I need to cut that circle down, take just a little bit off the edge so that I can punch a hole right in the centre of it. It means that the mandala will be slightly offset on my card, but that's actually the effect that I want. Off camera, I've also put a little pencil line through that hole on the inside of the card, and I'll show you why in a moment. So I'm going to glue my mandala in place. I'm going to take one of my stamp sentiments. I'm not going to cut this one up, it's safe, and I'm going to use Versacolour black ink just to ink my sentiment in place on the inside of my card, and then I'm going to remove my pencil line with an eraser. For card 6, I'm using Craft Card as my base, and I'm inking up the mandala stamp with Versamark ink, and I'm going to stamp this twice. I'm going to use white heat embossing powder, and then I'm going to heat set it. To colour these in, I happen to be using Derwent Graphic Line Painter pens. I'm using a turquoise and a grey, but you can use any ink-based pen. I found that the turquoise and the grey work really well on the craft, and that was after quite a lot of experimentation with different colours. I thought they worked really nicely together. So now I'm going to cut out the centre of the mandala that I've painted using the turquoise pen. And I'm going to layer these up with the turquoise colour in the centre of the grey coloured mandala, and then I'm going to glue on top one of the flowers. I've got one of the turquoisey coloured gold foil embossed candies, and again I'm reversing it. They're slightly dome shaped and I'm pushing it the other way to sit in the centre of my flower. I'm using a piece of bluey green paper from the paper pad set, and I'm going to use my mandala stamp again, inked up with Versacolour Laurel Leaf ink, and I'm going to cover the whole of my grey base card. So now I'm going to make sure I'm happy with the position of everything, and I'm going to glue my blue strip in place on the grey base card. And I'm going to stamp and white heat emboss over that blue strip, because that way I get those little prongs that stick out from the mandala that are quite difficult to cut out individually. And when I glue down the circle that I made earlier on with the little flower on top, you can see it looks as if it is the complete mandala. I'm using the same sentiment that I prepared for an earlier card, and this time I just want to slip it under the edge of the mandala and have it running just the length of that card. And the card is finished. Card 7 uses craft card again, and I'm stamping up my mandala with Versamark ink, and again I'm going to use embossing powder. This time I'm using black. This gives a terrific detail on that stamp, and I'm going to heat set these. Now I'm using one of my graphic liner pens again in white. You could use Dylusions white pen, any white pen that you have that will be a strong contrast to the black. And I'm going to colour in all of the little elements that I can get to within that mandala stamp, and the effect is quite sophisticated and shimmery as well. I've selected one of the round sentiments and I've chosen some of the flowers as well, and I'm just going to give them some dimension by rolling them over my fingers, and I'm going to glue them into place on the centre of each of my stamped mandalas. The sentiment I've chosen for this card is Best Wishes, and this could be a sympathy card or not necessarily, but because of the darker colours, especially because I'm going to matte this onto black card and then matte it onto craft grey card, I thought this was quite suitable for a sympathy card. I have some Nouveau drops in ebony, black ebony. I'm just checking on my hand. My hand ends up covered in ink and all sorts of things. I'm just checking that the flow is good before I add little droplets to my card. And my card is finished. In complete contrast to that card, we're going for something very bright. I wanted to use the frames. They've got some great textures on them, but I don't use 6x6 cards. I don't have envelopes for them. So I wanted to still use the frames, and so I'm taking advantage of the textures. I've got 3 Nouveau mousses in green, pink and blue, and I'm going to select one of the flowers on each of these. There are 3 full flowers that you can get from each frame. And I've highlighted the colours and the textures with those Nouveau mousses, and you can see I'm cutting it out. I'm going to cut out each of those ready to stick onto a white base card. So that's the sort of layout I want them to have, and now I'm using some of the circles from the stamp set and a Wow gold glitter embossing powder. So where those flowers sit is roughly where I want to stamp and emboss my circles. If you work quickly enough, you can get round the whole card without having to stop and then emboss it before the ink dries out. So I'm embossing these, and then I'm adding the embossing powder to these, and when they heat set you can see how shimmery that gold is. It's quite a strong glitter, and those circles are perfect for my little flowers from my frame to sit inside. I've got some flowers again and I'm going to pop those out, and I'm going to roll them around my fingers to give them some dimension, and I'm going to glue them in place on top of my texture flowers. So I'll glue each of those into position. For my sentiment, I want to raise that up a little bit and add some dimension, so I have some foam tape. That gives it just a little lift in the card without making the card too bulky. To make the card really pop, I'm going to use a piece of pink paper from the paper pad, and I'm going to stick that onto a piece of white base card, and I'm going to leave a little white border around my card. And then when that's in place, I'm going to glue the whole design onto the top of that pink panel, leaving a pink border around the outside. If I tweak the flowers, that just gives them a little bit of extra dimension. I've got Nouveau drops. This is a green one. It's called Apple Green. And I have a pink one. The pink one is called Carnation Pink, and I've put that in little dots on the white card. And once I've covered my white base card in lots and lots of pink dots, my card looks quite jolly, quite colourful, and it's complete. For card 9, I'm using a blue and greeny paper from the pad. I'm taking one of my mandalas, which I've already cut out, and I've adhered miricard to the back of this and then cut the miricard out to form a border around the mandala, as I did in an earlier card. I've stuck the paper onto white base card, and I'm going around the outside of the mandala with a pencil because I'm going to cut out the shape of the mandala to halfway into the card. I think what I mean will become apparent as you see the cuts going in. I'm cutting all one way and then I turn my card and I do all my cuts all the other way. I just find that easier. So you can see what I mean about I'm cutting halfway into the card. This is just about as far as you can cut without the card toppling over when you try and stand it up. I've glued the mandala into the space that I've cut, and now I'm using another of the mandalas and I'm going to cut out around the, I think I realised earlier on these were leaves, not petals, and I'm going to colour these in with a Zig Clean Colour green pen. Again, any green pen will do the job. Once that's dry, I can flip those leaves up and I can glue it into the centre of my mandala. I've chosen one of the round sentiments and I'm just cutting off the little tabs that you sometimes get when you pop it from the container card, and I'm just going to glue that into position as well. Now for anybody that loves twine, here's a twine warning. There's some gold twine going to go on this card. And I'm just going to tie a bow. Anybody that's seen my videos before, you know I'm not very good at tying bows. So I'm going to make it look as if I've got a really smart bow, and then I'm going to edit and move on. Oh look, bow, nothing to see here. That just finishes off my card just neatly. For card 10, I'm using a dark blue Nouveau mousse, and I've selected two of the frames that have the mandala embossed into the corners on opposite sides of the frame. I wanted to have a frame on one of my cards because I think these frames are lovely, but I didn't want to work with that size. I wanted something smaller. I'm using a dark green Nouveau embossing mousse to do to colour over the embossed mandala on the second frame, and I'm going to cut these out just following the design. So you can see I'm leaving everything else in place. I'm just taking the mandala embossed design from the frame. And you can see it keeps its square edge, and I'm going to use this to line up on my card. So you can see if I overlap them, I get a smaller frame and I'll glue this into position to fix that size. I'm going to use a piece of white base card and I'm going to cut this down so that it's a square card, and that will fit beautifully this frame. The two corner pieces don't exactly fit, but that's not a problem. I have a solution for that as well. So I'm gluing them down in place. And now you see how I get myself out of this problem. I'm going to use some of the flowers and I'm going to stick them onto the card, and I'm going to use them to cover up the white gaps that are left where the frame doesn't quite meet. So that way I have a beautiful frame. It's beautifully embossed. The mandala is highlighted using the Nouveau Mousse, and I still get to have some flowers on my card as well. I'm going to add some foam pads to the back of my round sentiment before I attach that in the middle to give the card a little bit more dimension, and I'm going to use 4 of the pink candies with the gold embossing on them to adhere to the centre of my flowers, just to add a little bit of extra zhuzh to the card. I'm going to say thank you very much for watching as always. I appreciate your time. I'm going to leave you with some close-ups of all of the cards that we've made today and a little music.